Good morning, everyone. It's 12 CET time sharp, so time to start our webinar. I'm delighted to welcome you to our last webinar of the year on a very important topic for us, business and human rights. And in fact, we may not think about it, it's a topic that touches our lives every day. For example, when you dress every morning and look at who produced the fabric, who produced the garment, or even when you eat your breakfast. For those that are joining us for the first time, my name is Luisa Ferreira and I'm head of the social program at the European Investment Bank Institute, and I will be your host for today's webinar. And it's my great pleasure to introduce you to today's speakers, Inês Vilar and Francisco Granja de Almeida, both from the international law firm Vieira de Almeida and Associados. So let me just briefly introduce the speakers to you. Francisco Granja de Almeida is an associate lawyer at VDA. He got his law degree at University of Lisbon and holds an LLM in Public International Law by the University of Utrecht in Holland, where he specialized in human rights. Inês Vilar is currently a trainee lawyer at VDA. She got her law degree at Universidade Nova de Lisboa and holds an LLM in International and European Law with a specialization on international and human rights as well by the University of Tilburg in the Netherlands as well. They both work at the VDA social economy practice, where on a daily basis they work with NGOs and businesses to advise them on their human rights responsibilities. So they are the right people to answer all the questions you may have on the topic. Before I give the mic to Francisco and Inês, a couple of logistic remarks. First, note that the webinar is being recorded and will be available in a few days in our YouTube channel, together with all the webinars we have been developing for our Social Innovation Tournament alumni. Second, sometimes it happens, if there's an issue with your audio, please make sure it's connected, or if it's not, rejoin the call. Usually it works. At the end of the webinar, there are several ways to interact with us. You can use the raising hand option, you can give other type of feedback, and you can use chat and Q&A. When you use chat and Q&A, I ask you to please use the option send to all panelists. And also, if you have questions for our guest speakers, it's easier for me if you all ask your questions using Q&A rather than chat. So we have one channel for all the questions. And before I forget, at the end of the webinar, we'll ask you to answer a short survey to give us your feedback on the webinar. Thanks, and now I invite Francisco and Inês to join us. Inês and Francisco, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Luisa. I would like to start by saying thank you to the European Investment Bank Institute for this great opportunity. We are truly honored to be here today to discuss business and human rights with you and to hopefully display throughout this webinar how human rights due diligence is a key step towards sustainable development. So this being said, we have three main goals for today. The first is to raise awareness for the fact that under United Nations regulations, every company of all sizes and sectors has the responsibility to respect and promote human rights throughout their value chain. The second goal is to present some legal developments on a topic from a global, a regional, and a domestic perspective. And third, to provide some tips on how you and your social enterprise or your company can implement human rights due diligence. To do so, we are going to go over these topics. So first, we're going to start by setting the scene. What is business and human rights? How are we talking about human rights being applicable to enterprises and businesses? We're going to do this by first giving you a brief introduction of what are human rights, then assess a very interesting topic about what is the position of corporations and businesses under international law. After that, we're going to see the adverse impact of business in human rights and how this can come to be, and discussed a little bit of the future through corporate sustainability and how business and human rights is a key player in social sustainability and development. After that, we'll try to note the legal landscape from a global, regional, and domestic perspective, including a reference to what we know that might be new upcoming EU mandatory due diligence legislation for 2021. And we're gonna go through this by trying to give you some tips on how to implement human rights due diligence in 4 steps. And then we're going to provide you some conclusions so you can all go back to your works and homes with some final ideas on the importance of business and human rights. So this being said, we're going to set the scene by talking about how this came to be, that businesses are now under assessment towards their human rights responsibilities. Because as we all know, human rights began as responsibilities to the state and through international human rights law. And businesses are not typically addressed as subjects of international law. So now we're going to discuss this to introduce the topic. So first, a very important slide. What are human rights? As we know, human rights are universal legal guarantees that protect individuals and groups from actions or omissions by governments that violate human dignity. So basically, the idea of human rights is as simple as it is powerful, that people have a right to be treated with dignity and equality. But this is not just a political principle or an ideology. This is defined by international human rights law. And as we will see, international human rights law, it's a body of public international law that creates legal obligations for the states. But how is this monitored? Are there courts? Are there bodies? And yes, there are courts where states can be sued under the human rights obligations. And there's the entire United Nations system, which is the global system to monitor human rights implementation by the state. So to wrap up, what human rights are, they are inherent in all human beings, whatever their nationality, their place of residence, their sex, national or ethnic origin, color, religion, language, or any other statutes. Every individual is entitled to enjoy human rights without discrimination. And this is the cornerstone of this field, which will always be human dignity and human equality. But again, what are they? They are legal, formal standards that bind states through treaty law. And states are bound to it. And if they fail to comply with treaty obligations, they might get sued in international courts. So basically, international human rights law lays down obligations on states to act in certain ways or to refrain from certain acts in order to promote and to protect the human rights and fundamental freedoms of individuals and groups. So in practice, their states come together to sign treaties, and in those treaties, human rights are defined. To give you some concrete examples, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights was signed in 1966 and secures the right to not be arbitrarily deprived of life, the right to be free from torture and slavery, the right to freedom of thought, conscience, and religion. But there is another major treaty that focuses on economical, social, and cultural rights. This is the treaty called the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights, which is also from 1966. And this treaty focuses on the right to work, the right to take part in cultural life, and to have an adequate standard of living. So, as we know by now, human rights are these global universal standards that are binding to the states through international law. And now, Inês, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, Francisco, thank you. And thank you everyone for being here today. We think that it is important to, Francisco already mentioned these characteristics, but we thought it could be interesting to give you a more detailed explanation about the 4 of them. So basically, all the human rights are fundamental, are universal, are inalienable, are interdependent and interrelated, which means that they are fundamental because these rights represent essential questions for human beings as regards their existence and their autonomy. It means that they contain a nature of necessity and not only representing desirably aspects. They are also universal, and Francisco already gave you a brief explanation about this. This means that they all apply equally to all people everywhere in the world and with no time limit. It means that every individual is entitled to enjoy his or her human dignity without distinction of race, ethnic background, color, gender, etc. They are also inalienable, and this characteristic is strictly connected with the first one, with the fundamentality of the human rights. This means that you cannot lose the human right. They are linked to the very fact of human existence. They are inherent to all human beings. But it's important to understand that in particular circumstances, some, not all of them, may be suspended or restricted. Nowadays, we are living a moment in our lives with this pandemic, COVID, that we are experiencing our freedom being restricted when we have lockdowns and etc. And also when someone is found guilty of a crime, for example, his or her freedom can be taken away. And finally, these human rights, or all human rights, are interdependent and interrelated. This means that different human rights are intrinsically connected and cannot be separated from each other. This also means that the enjoyment of one right depends on the enjoyment of many other rights. And you cannot say that one is more important than the other. They complement each other. And this is really, really important about human rights. You have to be all of them, you have to have all of them to be really fulfilled. And now I think, Francisco, you can.
Thanks, Inês. So now that Inês really stressed the fundamental notions of what a human right is, we're going to discuss very briefly the more theoretical issue that concerns the entire body of practice of business and human rights. It's that international human rights treaties generally do not impose direct legal obligations on businesses' enterprise. This is due to the fact that under international law standards, many authors still defend that a business or an enterprise is not a subject of international law. This is based on the fact that the traditional model of the international law, the very fundamental state A celebrates the treaty with state B that creates obligations for the citizens, operates through a clear dichotomy between subject and object. So the subjects are normally the states and international organizations that are themselves constituted by states, and the object can be the states, individuals, communities, and businesses. But businesses themselves are not properly subjects of international law. This is a quite theoretical discussion which is now being very, very criticized, and new thought is coming to it. But this traditional model has two fundamental notions, as I told you, that are now being discussed, is that only states and international organizations are subject to international law, and then international law can reach non-state actors through indirect effects only. When we're talking about non-state actors, we're talking about rebel groups, businesses. So bodies of society, organs of society that do infringe on human rights, are able to promote human rights, but they are not technically subjects of international law. Without going too much into detail, this model has undergone a process of transformation since the emergence of international humanitarian law, international human rights law, and international criminal law. Just to give you an idea, these three bodies of international law are kind of the sons of public international law. So international humanitarian law is a different thing from human rights law. Humanitarian law concerns the war and the conflict. So basically it's called the law of war. So when states are in armed conflict, what are the rules that apply throughout the war? Human rights law, it's more important for this topic because it concerns with human rights obligations and how state actors and non-state actors can secure these human rights. And international criminal law, it's still a different body of law. It's the body of law that is concerned with international crimes, crimes of war, and it's ruled by International Criminal Court in The Hague. So this may be a little bit of information, but we would just like to give you this bird view on international law, because this is the bit of the theoretical question that underlines the entire process. So how are human rights relevant to businesses? As we've seen, international human rights treaties generally do not impose direct obligations on businesses enterprise. Therefore, legal liability and enforcement for the infringement by businesses of international human rights law, it's largely defined by state and national law. However, the actions of business enterprises, just like the actions of non-state actors, like the army groups we've talked about, can affect the enjoyment of human rights by others, either positively or negatively. And as we all know by now, it's very clear that enterprises can affect the human rights of their employees, their customers, workers in their supply chains, and communities around their operations. So indeed, experience shows that enterprises can and do infringe human rights where they are not paying sufficient attention to the risk and how to reduce it. But also, enterprises are such an important mechanism for development and for jobs and to create well-being in the communities. So what we would like to stress with this slide is that this theoretical question is under assessment, and we are going to focus on the obligations of businesses under United Nations soft law. Inês, want to take it from here?
Thanks, Francisco. Yes. Let me just start by saying that we received some Q&A questions when you all registered in the webinar. And I think that it's interesting to take one of those questions that came from Luxembourg to start this slide. And the question was, what is the correlation between business and human rights? That is exactly what we are talking about here today. And in this specific slide, we are going to talk about a negative correlation. Francisco just said that this correlation can be either positive or negative. But in this slide, as I said, I'm going to focus on the negative side of this relationship. So the growing reach and impact of business enterprises have given rise to the debate about the roles and responsibilities of such actors with regard to human rights, and have led to placement of business and human rights in the UN agenda. We are talking about violation of human rights in business in this slide. We need to understand the importance and the seriousness of the topic. If we understand the adverse impact that an action can cause in someone's life, we'll maybe understand the importance of this topic. Let me just tell you what is an adverse human rights impact. It occurs when an action removes or reduces the ability of an individual or a group to enjoy his, her, or their human rights. And in this slide, we show some examples of really serious human rights violations and what the impact that it can cause. We are talking about human trafficking. We are talking about modern slavery, child labor, racial and gender discrimination, marginalization of indigenous people, limitation of freedom of association. And in fact, are the corporations, are the enterprises that can cause these violations, these human rights adverse impacts. And that it was so important to create the UNGPs. The UNGPs are the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. And we are going to discuss it a little bit more in detail later. But basically, they are a set of guidelines for states and companies to prevent, address, and remedy human rights abuses committed in business operations. It is the most important document on business human rights, but it's the first authoritative global framework regarding the impact of business on human rights, but it is soft law, as Francisco just mentioned also before. It is soft law. This example that is now in your screen, the 13 guiding principle, specifically states that businesses have a responsibility to respect human rights. And there are 3 basic ways in which an enterprise can be involved in an adverse impact on human rights. It may cause the impact through its own activity, the enterprise itself. It may contribute to the impact through its own activity, here either directly or indirectly, through some outside entity, the government, other business, or some other stakeholder. And last but not least, that is really important, it may neither cause nor contribute to the impact, but it can be involved, because the impact is caused by an entity with which it has a business relationship and is linked to its own operation, products, or services. Here, generally, we are talking about the supply chain, which means that you can cause, as a business enterprise, you can cause an adverse impact on human rights that can result in one of these that we listed here: human trafficking, modern slavery, in various ways, either directly or indirectly. But this is not all about bad news today, and that's why Francisco will give you the good news or the positive side of this.
Thank you, Inês. And here we are, taking on Inês and drawing on Inês' comments. Business and human rights is also a force for good, in the sense that we know that businesses are great actors for social development, well-being, and health of the communities. So we would like to put business in human rights in the spectrum of corporate sustainability. Where does business and human rights as a service, it's included in the spectrum? So corporate sustainability, nowadays we're talking a lot about ESG criteria. So the environmental, social, and governance factors that measure the sustainability of a business. And business and human rights integrates predominantly the social dimension of sustainability. This is because business and human rights its main focus are the people. And like Inês said, this terrible pandemic that devastated the world's economy this year, we saw that the people are the foundation of every business. So we now know the importance of social dimension of sustainability, which many point out that for the last couple of years has been a little bit underplayed through the green sustainability and the environment. They are obviously equally important, but human rights are predominantly a concern of the social dimension. But as we all know, if there's pollution in the river and the communities by the river consume the waters, then the human rights to health is affected. So I don't think that it's to have a puristic perspective on the differences between social and environment is very helpful, because indeed they are intrinsically connected. This being said, business and human rights is also a great inspiration for corporate social responsibility and sustainability programs. So it's fundamental that enterprises are not looking to human rights only to prevent violations. They are looking to human rights as agents that can promote the dignity and the equality of people that work for those corporations, people that are affected by those corporations. So business and human rights also wants to shine a light on how businesses can have this active promotion of human rights and truly be a force for good, that many already are. And talking about businesses that already are aligned with sustainability, I would like to give the word back to Inês so she can give you a thought on social enterprises.
Yes, if we are here today, it's because we are talking about also social entrepreneurs, I guess, and some of you probably are these social entrepreneurs. And why does Francisco say that? In fact, social enterprises uses business methods to achieve financial sustainability for organizations seeking to create social impact. These organizations, some of your organizations, often operate in areas which are traditionally administered by governments. As such, we see here a potential to implement right-based approaches which integrates human rights principles into organizational design and procedure and processes, and put pressure on the traditional responsible. That typically is the government. Human rights can provide basically the framework for action with social enterprise, and that social enterprise needs. And here, that's why we think that the social enterprises maybe are the most well-positioned to operationalize right-based approaches and to establish a much-needed dialogue between the communities and formal human rights regimes and being together. And that's why we think that it's so important that you are in a unique position to show others how you can do it and how you can do it for good.
That was great, Inês. Thank you. So let me change the slide really quickly, because we're going to move to the another dimension of this webinar, and we're going to address the legal landscape. So as we know, we're lawyers, so this is kind of what we do. And what we would like to do with this part of the webinar is to stress that the business responsibility to promote human rights and to respect human rights, it's not a mere political position by the United Nations. It is becoming hard law throughout the globe. And what this means is that soft law doesn't create legally binding obligations, but hard law does. So the legislation that we have in our own states is mainly hard law, but the legislation that comes from the UN, just like the United Nations Guiding Principles that Inês said, it's typically referred as soft law. And this dimension of the webinar has the goal to show you how very quickly soft law obligations are becoming hard law obligations, and that your businesses and your social enterprises might be under direct obligations through your national state. Inês, do you want to take it from here?
Yes, thanks, Francisco. This is a bit more theoretical now, but I think that it's also important to understand the legal framework and to understand what we have nowadays. So the UN Guiding Principles that we already mentioned before in this presentation, they were presented by the Special Representative of the United Nations, Professor John Ruggie, and when they were in 2011, they were unanimously approved by the United Nations General Assembly. They became the first global authority framework concerning human rights for business. This move was really important because it established that these guiding principles was from then until today, the global standards of practice that is now and that was expected of all states and business with regard to business and human rights to respect. While they do not by themselves constitute a legally binding document, the guiding principles elaborate on the implications of existing standards and practices for states and business, and include points covered variously in international and domestic law. These guiding principles were based on work also done by the special representative, John Ruggie. There was this framework that you are seeing here in the presentation, and the guiding principles were developed to put into operation the protect, respect, and remedy framework. Here in this just a quick view of this framework, what this framework told us was that the state has the duty to protect human rights, the corporates has the responsibility to respect human rights, and then there was this need for greater access to remedy for victims of business-related abuse. The UNGPs are the first, as I told you, but this is important, are the first authoritative global framework regarding the impact of business on human rights. It comprises 31 principles that altogether outline the steps for states to foster business, respect for human rights, provide a blueprint for companies to manage the risk of having an adverse impact on human rights, and offer a set of benchmarks for stakeholders to assess business respect for human rights. The guiding principles have gained extensive support from businesses and civil society in general, as well as the states. And nowadays, there are many corporations around the world that are implementing the UNGPs, and others are already looking at how they can implement them in their operations. There are also a number of other international and regional organizations that have reflected the guiding principles in their own standards, and more are expected to do it in the years to come. Basically, these guiding principles clarify the human rights responsibilities of businesses. They seek to provide the first global standard for preventing and addressing, and this is really important, addressing the risk of adverse human rights impact linked to business activities. As we said before, they are an authoritative normative platform which will also provide guidance regarding legal and policy measures that states can put in place to ensure corporate respect for human rights, because they are not legally binding. As Francisco mentioned before, they are soft law, but they can be used by the states to implement their own domestic legislation, and it is being used in the past years. Just to finish, because we have to move on, but just to finish this slide, let me tell you that Professor Rugi has stated that these guiding principles will not bring all human rights challenges to an end, but the endorsement marks the end of the beginning. They provide a solid and practical foundation on which more learning and good practice can be built.
That was great, Inês. Thank you. So just building up on what Inês just said, if today after this webinar, you can check one document of what we've said, we would advise you to check the guiding principles on business and human rights, because as Inês very well told you, this is the beginning for every human rights due diligence in your company. And they are written not in a technical matter. So they are written for businesses, for every sector in order to implement human rights due diligence. So thank you, Inês, on that. Moving forward, this was the global United Nations perspective on the topic. And now we're going to zoom in a little to the European regulation, because, okay, perfect. We're going to zoom in. So we saw the global through the United Nations. We're going to zoom in to the European legislation. We're very sorry to all the webinar watchers they're listening to us around the world and not from Europe. But we wanted to give you this example because it's going to be a regional development, which is going to take human rights due diligence to the next step, we believe. Because this April, the European Commission Reinhardt announced the introduction of legislation on mandatory human rights and environmental due diligence for companies. So this year, we heard from the Commission that a proposal is going to be made to the Parliament in order to establish legislation to the entire European Union on this topic. So we are looking into what probably will look like hard law obligations for the states coming from the center of the European Union. And basically, this process is going quite fast because this September, just a few months ago, the draft report of the European Committee on Legal Affairs of the European Parliament was given to the European Commission. So a very quick debrief on this. Basically, the European Parliament has a body specialized on legal affairs. This body presented a draft comment to the Commission, and now the Commission is going to present its formal proposal to the European Parliament. And we already took a look at this draft report, and it's very, very extensive in matters of scope, but we will get to it in our next slide. So what can we expect next year? Well, basically, legislative initiative by European Commission is expected. So we're hoping that this process takes the first formal steps within the Parliament by a proposal from the European Commission. Regarding the implementation period, it's not yet foreseeable. We are still discussing projects in the draft, but we will look at probably 12 to 18 months after the adoption for the implementation period. This could mean that by 2022, 2023, we could have obligations on human rights due diligence in force. And this is very, very exciting news because the United Nations already provided its recommendations to the European Union on this topic. So what do we know so far about the EU mandatory due diligence legislation that is upcoming? And I apologize for this little breaks, but I'm trying to change that. Okay, here we go. What are these key elements announced by Commissioner Reynaert in April? What do we know so far? Well, we know that this legislative proposal will establish due diligence requirements throughout the supply chain and establish mandatory minimum requirements to address human rights and environmental risks. So as we saw when we discussed the part that businesses take in sustainability and sustainable development, we saw that it's not very useful for businesses to separate their human rights policy from their environmental policy. They ought to be connected. And this is now very much defined by the European Union when its proposed legislation binds both and puts two together. Human rights and environmental risks are going to be addressed in the same document, probably. We also know that this initiative will be cross-sectoral and will consider companies of all sizes. Probably this will differentiate in the approach and timeline. So bigger companies will have a different kind of framework than smaller companies, but we know that this is going to be, just like the United Nations Guiding Principles, applicable to every business of every size. And as I said, this initiative will be strongly based on the UNGPs, because as Inês very well explained, the UNGPs are the global framework from the United Nations that were endorsed in the General Assembly. So they have that stamp of quality from the United Nations. So every legislation that is coming through national law and domestic law, it's reflecting the United Nations Guiding Principles. And also, it was announced that probably these due diligence requirements shall be sanctioned by member states. So we might be looking at sanctions for these matters. As we've said, these are just our thoughts on the topic. There has been no formal proposal from the Commission to the Parliament yet, but we're very excited about this announcement by the Commission already. Furthermore, we took a look at the draft report, and that has already been published. And in the draft report, we know that this legislation might have a very, very broad scope or into which it will be applicable. So which companies are going to be under this legislation? Well, the draft report states very clearly that all undertakings in the sense of business enterprises, governed by law of a member state or established on the territory of the Union. And this is a very big slice of the business sector. Moreover, the legislation shall also apply to limited liability undertakings governed by the law of a non-member state and not established in the territory of the Union if they operate in the internal market, selling goods or providing services. So as we hope to show through this slide, the scope of this mandatory EU due diligence, it's going to be broad, probably. I cannot stress enough that we are still looking at what the European Commission announced it to be and what were the recommendations of the United Nations to the EU. But this is our thoughts on the topic, and we are very excited to hear next year about formal proposals and formal process in the European Parliament. Inês, go ahead, and I think you're still muted. Sorry, I should have given you the kickoff for your slide. Sorry.
Let's zoom in a little bit more, and let's go for the domestic examples. Quick, because we are running out of time, but we cannot just do not say anything about this. It is interesting because increasingly the business sector itself is pushing for legislation at international, regional, and domestic level to mandatorily conduct human rights due diligence, as Francisco just explained, but also to mandatory reporting on these matters. The following legislation developments have already taken place and are to be implemented. These ones that you see in this line time. We have the Modern Slavery in Australia, the Duty of Surveillance Act in France, Conflict Minerals Regulation is a European Union regulation, Child Labour Due Diligence Act in Holland, Modern Slavery Act in the United Kingdom, and this one is important because it's globally leading piece of legislation. It sets out a range of measures on how modern slavery and human trafficking should be dealt with in the UK. It's not an act directly relevant for business, but it has a section that is entitled as Transparency in Supply Chain that impacts the corporate sector. We also have the Supply Chain Transparency Act in the state of California and the Non-Financial Information Directive in the European Union. And this one also deserves a little bit more detailed. It is important because it was part of the strategy to the strength and the foundation of sustainable investment. The principal aim of this directive was to enable the investment community, consumers, and other stakeholders to evaluate the non-financial performance of large companies and to encourage those companies to develop a more responsibly approach to business. Let me just tell you that there are some other countries, Switzerland, Austria, Belgium, Denmark, Finland, Germany, Luxembourg, Norway, and others that have also projects and initiatives in this area. And also since 2014, it is in the UN agenda a discussion on the possibility of a drafting of a binding treaty on business and human rights, something that will complement the UNGPs.
Okay, thank you, Ines. We're going to zoom in even more. So we went through the UN, we went through the EU, we went through domestic examples, and now we're going to go directly to the company, to the business. How can we implement business and human rights? Our goal here is to give you some tips and just to give you a view of how this process looks like.
Thanks, Francisco. I'll start by just explain briefly, because we already talked about this during the presentation, but what is a human rights due diligence? And for this purpose, I'm going to take another of your questions, that is, how can businesses ensure no children are working in their supply chain? We need better approaches than only remediation plans. That was a question that arrived with your registration. And we think that this is how you can do a human rights due diligence. But what is a human rights due diligence? Because probably you know due diligence in other contexts, but here it's a bit different. It was in the context of the guiding principles that we mentioned before, that human rights due diligence comprises this ongoing management process that a reasonable and prudent enterprise needs to undertake in the light of its circumstances to meet its responsibility to respect human rights. It means that through a human rights due diligence, an enterprise will identify the information it needs in order to understand its specific human rights risks at any specific point in time and in any specific operating context, as well as the actions it needs to take to prevent and to mitigate them. In fact, human rights due diligence is not a single prescriptive formula. It should be customized. It should be customized to your business, to your activity, to your company, to your employees, everything. But Francisco will tell you more about it, and Francisco will explain how you should do it, the steps that you should take in order to do a human rights due diligence.
Thank you, Ines. As Ines said, there are steps that you can take. And although human rights due diligence should be looking at your business specifically, there are 4 key steps to implement human rights due diligence in your business or social enterprise. And this is the goal of this slide. So as Ines well told you, due diligence in human rights, it is an ongoing process of risk management that a company should follow in order to identify, prevent, mitigate, and respond to its possible adverse human rights impacts, but also to promote social sustainability. And this goes through 4 major steps. The first is identification and assessment of actual and potential human rights impacts. When we're talking about identification and assessment, and as we saw in the beginning of the webinar, you can ask yourself, well, there are so many human rights. It's such a broad scope of international law. How am I going to identify which are the human rights that I should be caring about? And that's exactly the first question that you should make, because you should start by identifying your salient human rights risks. And the guiding principles make clear that an enterprise should not focus exclusively on the most salient human rights issues, and ignore others that might arise. But as in practical terms, the most salient risks and human rights will logically be the ones on which it concentrates its primary efforts. So you have to look at your business, you have to look at your activity, and try to meditate on which human rights could be more at risk in a matter of scale, scope, and remediability. This means that you should look first at the scale, at how grave could be the human right impact, the scope into how many people can we be looking at that are being affected, and the remediability, it's how easy or how hard it is to remediate that human rights violation. So using this pyramid to focus on all the human rights, what are the salient risks? What's the scope, what's the scale, and how is the remediability degree? And by doing so, you will have yourself your salient human rights risks. But as I said, and I would like to stress this, human rights are interdependent, like Inês said. So there is nothing in principle that precludes any enterprise from causing or contributing to an adverse impact on any international human rights. And it's therefore not possible to limit the application of the responsibility to respect human rights to a particular subject. They are holistic and they should all be respected at the same time. Moving forward, the integration and action on the basis of the results. This is all about action. After you identify your and you assess your human rights in impact throughout or not, your potential human rights risks and your places to work forward and to promote human rights, you should provide integration and action on the basis of those results. This means that you should take concrete measures to implement human rights due diligence in your company's action. And we would like to give you some examples to give you some food for thought on how you could do this in practice. First, capacity building. From the board to the operational team, your people should be aware that your business has a responsibility towards human rights. And this is done through capacity building that it's transversal. So it is not, of course, it's important to advise the board, but human rights capacity should be done throughout your organization. After that, you should draft internal and external policies and codes of conduct on human rights. This is very important because external policies will tell your stakeholders that your vision for your company is social sustainability and that you are committed to it and that you are accountable to it. And the internal policies will define procedures within your practice so that everyone is engaged truly in this, and it's not just one website publication. It's more than that. It's true embedment of human rights due diligence. After this, you can first redefine the strategy and the vision of your company towards sustainability so that human rights can be put into your holistic version of sustainability together with the environment and together with governance and together with all ESG criteria. Also, you should check your contracts and insert specific human rights compliance warranties. So by inserting in your contracts as warranties, you're committed to your human rights due diligence, and you're actually being a part of the movement because your counterpart on your contract will see that your company has put a human rights due diligence clause, which then will create awareness. That is what we are all here doing today. Also, procurement and M&A transactions. So if your procurement department and your M&A transactions team is not aware to do human rights due diligence when purchasing services or purchasing in other companies or selling in other companies, then you're not going to make a human rights due diligence on a purchase or an M&A transaction. So it's very important to keep your M&A transactions strategy with a human rights embedment. So this is the measures, the how-to. But after this, it's very important to follow up and monitor the actions carried out by your company. Because if you do not follow up and monitor the due diligence process, then it will become a one-shot procedure and it will not cause embedded impact on your structure and your sustainability strategy. And after this, you should always proceed to external communication and reporting. Many companies under EU law already have this obligation, but they are still huge companies. The scope is tighter, but it's very important that you let your stakeholders know what you're doing towards your human rights due diligence. And this being said, we're very happy to announce that we finished in time, precisely at 51. And we would like to provide some just final remarks for you to keep in mind, apart from the fact that you should definitely check the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights.
Yes, let me, if I may, Francisco, I'll start by stating that human rights are in fact universal, inalienable, interdependent. They are legal guarantees that protect individuals and peoples against actions or omissions by states that compromise human dignity. They are recognized by treaties and other sources of international law, as Francisco just mentioned in the beginning of his presentation, and they are monitored by specialized bodies and courts for this purpose.
Perfect. Also, all companies, regardless of their size or sector, have the responsibility to protect, promote, and in the event of an adverse impact, repair human rights. This responsibility has been unanimously established by the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights.
To this end, that Francisco just told you, companies have the responsibility to implement human rights due diligence through the 4 steps that Francisco just explained to you in the last slide. You have to identify the risks, integrate and prevent mechanisms, monitoring and follow-up. And finally, but not least, it's really important to communicate and report.
Absolutely. Examples of these key measures are to proceed to internal and external policies and revise your contractual instruments and truly provide a capacity training for your company.
And we also should have our eyes in our supply chain, because supply chains can be complex and transnational and can represent a legal and reputational risk for companies, and therefore should be analyzed and managed in light of applicable human rights standards.
To finish, there is an ongoing legislative movement in which states are transposing into their national legislation binding obligations for companies on human rights and social sustainability. So change before you have to. Legislation is coming, and do not forget to check the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights and see how they can apply it to your business. And I think this is it. Thank you very much. Here's our pretty faces and our emails. Luisa.
Thank you so much, Francisco and Inés. We still have time for a few questions, and I'm going to start with one that I think has a quick answer, and I'll let you decide who answers the questions or if it's both. And one is, you've mentioned several times throughout the presentation the supply chain, but I have a question which is whether activities, when they are mentioned in the UN Guiding Principles, if they also relate to financing.
Well, we know for sure that the EU upcoming legislation is going to be throughout all sectors as the United Nations Guiding Principles. So the answer I would say would be yes, finance sector and finance institutions are under the United Nations Guiding Principles for Business and Human Rights. And as what we can learn from the Commission announcement is that the EU mandatory due diligence law that it's upcoming will probably refer to finance as well.
fact, I have several questions popping up at the same time, and I'm going to ask you this one, and then I will go to the ones we received at the time of registration. Whether you think that we should wait for the EU law, or it's also very important that each country starts working ahead of time, for example, Netherlands and child labor laws.
Inês, I can take this one as well, but if you want to reply, please interrupt me, okay, Inês?
Go ahead.
It's that we think that countries have that responsibility already to start implementing this legislation. And we've seen this all around the world. And it's not just the EU. We've seen that California has done it, Australia has done it, and these states took the responsibility to protect human rights under international human rights law and developed national frameworks for it. So I don't think that in our case, specific case, Portugal should be waiting for the EU mandatory legislation. It should legislate in forward to that principle, just like France did or the UK did. Yeah.
Okay, the $1 million question, if you guys have the answer, which is regarding suppliers, namely the supply chain, how and where can you research to make sure that your suppliers or our suppliers are not violating or negatively impacting human rights and environmental risks?
It's in fact the key question, because it's in fact a very good question. And I think that the answer should go through procurement and know your client. So that procurement departments in their companies should be aware for human rights due diligence, and also know your client standard procedures should also cover this kind of impact. So, and one very important aspect of human rights due diligence is never work alone. So let in your company, your legal advisors talk to the procurement officers and talk to the board and create multidimensional teams to assess human rights, because this is such a global issue that requires a global answer. So to only have a legal department on your business taking care of this would probably not be as effective as if your legal department or your legal advisors are working together with your procurement officers.
Yes, and in fact, it's one of the biggest purposes of doing a human rights due diligence, is to know your not your client in this case, but know your stakeholders.
Yes.
Another very interesting question, which is, while we know that the right to health and well-being is a fundamental human right, how do you guys see mental health, including stress, lack of motivation, being tackled in the current organization, and what you believe will be the trends?
Okay, that is another very well put and interesting question, because there is a human right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standards of mental health. So I would say that there is a right to mental health, and it is established in the Article 12, paragraph 1 of the International Covenant of Economical, Social and Cultural Rights. So as you know, this was one of the questions that came through the registry, because I already know the article. But
it was prepared, but that's
I was prepared for
that's
this.
good. That's good.
Human right to health is a human right, and in the human right to health, there is the human right to mental health. It's a part of this human right to the enjoyment of the highest attainable standard of physical and mental health possible. So I would say that because the United Nations Guiding Principles have this very large scope when they're talking about human rights, they say that the human rights that are under the responsibility of businesses are every human rights at a minimum that is included in the International Covenant for Civil and Political Rights, the International Covenant for Economical, Social and Cultural Rights, the principles of the ILO, and the declaration of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So we have 4 treaties that have specific human rights, and the human right to mental health, it's included in one of those treaties. So I would say that absolutely, businesses have a responsibility towards the mental health of their stakeholders and their employees. And I think this is going to be a global trend. I think COVID has accelerated this conversation. due to the fact that many people are working from home, and their work-life structure has been impacted, and throughout the stress and the lack of purpose. And mental health is very, very important. During the COVID, we've been seeing a lot of awareness to take care of your mental health during the COVID times and the pandemic. So I think that it is a great question, because businesses do have a responsibility towards this human rights. Yes.
Thank you. This is the perfect timing. We had several other questions that I believe they've been mostly of them answered throughout the presentation. It's 1 o'clock. So thank you, Francisco. Thank you, Inês. I wish we could all clap, and I ask you all to please answer the questions that are now on your screen about the webinar. Thank you so much. I wish you all very happy holidays of those that are still with us, and stay tuned for the next webinars next year. Thank you, Francisco. Thank you, Inês.
Thank you, Luisa.
Thank you, Luisa.
And thank you everyone for being here today.